just to introduce our study, just kind of business-wise, this is the book that we're going to be using. Now, does everybody have a book or have a book on the way? Maybe I should ask, is there anybody that doesn't have a book or doesn't have a book on the way? Because if you need help with the book, I'd be happy to help you with that. So just let me know if you need help with that. We're using, this book is Genesis 1 through 11, and we'll talk about why those particular chapters here as we go through. And it's written by Jen Wilkin. Now, if you looked online, you might have seen that you could buy a more expensive book that has videos that go with it, but we're not going to be watching the videos together in class. So we just got the book. It's a workbook. It's 10 weeks plus a wrap-up week. That means we're going to be meeting for 11 weeks. So that's a little bit longer than what we normally do, but 11 weeks. So for you calendar people, April 22nd is our last meeting. We are going to meet over spring break because different people have different spring breaks. And so, some people are just going to miss out a little bit. Some people have doctor's appointments. Not everybody's going to be in every study, but we're not taking a spring break. On that note, if you do miss a class and you would like to catch up on it, it is video recorded. This is recorded, and so you can watch the recording on the YouTube channel would be the best way to get a hold of that. Okay. But that's a good question. Let's open up, not to insult anyone's intelligence, okay? But let's open up our books to page 17. Oh, come on in. Let's see. There's a place at a table right here so you wouldn't be sitting by yourself. Yeah. Okay. Now, all right. Well, I'll ask her later. So let's open up to page 16 or 17, right? Okay, and that says week 2. Today in class, we're going to do week 1. So when you go home, you start week 2. Now, that seems like very, thank you, Captain Obvious, okay? But I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. And then if you turn, right, it says day 1 and has some questions. And then there'll be a day 2 with some questions. Okay, so there's 5 days of reading and answering questions. In my opinion, which is my opinion only, right, it's best to do it just to spread it out over 5 days. A little each day, just a little cumulative, a little thinking about it, a little cumulative. But, real life happens, and that doesn't always work. And so if you want to, some days are shorter, and it's possible to do 2 or 3 days at a time, But after day 5, if you turn to page 29, at the end of every lesson, there's going to be what's called a wrap-up. So don't forget to do the wrap-up, okay? You can just wrap that up into day 5. But you'll see, the first is always the same. What aspect of God's character has this week's passage shown you more clearly? Okay, so after you go through it, what have I learned about God? What do I see about him? And maybe you need help coming up with a characteristic, or what do I call it? I think it's listed in your book there. On the back on page 184, she has listed a bunch of characteristics of God. But if none of those are fitting what you've learned, then you just come up with your own. You can name it whatever you want to name it, okay? But what do I learn about God? Who is he? Then the next part is, knowing that God is, fill in the blank, what you just said, right, shows me that I am, fill in the blank, and then what's one step you can take to live in light of this truth, okay? This is like there's application questions throughout the week, but this is like the main application in my estimation, right? What do I learn about God? And who do I see about myself? And what's a step that I can take to live in light of that? For example, let's say I see that God is merciful. God is merciful. Maybe that's what we learn. And you say, I see that. And you can have a variety of different, probably all of our answers are not going to be the same. And that's going to be fun because then we're going to come back and share what stood out to you, okay? But say it stands out, God is merciful. And then you could say, it shows me that I need to receive mercy. Or it shows me I need to give mercy. And then my application would be, I need to trust that God is merciful and rest in that instead of trying to earn my salvation. Or maybe it's, I need to show a little more mercy to person ABC in my life. So that gives you the idea of what that's looking for. We might all have the same answer, but I doubt it. We'll all have some different answers. And we're just going to kind of keep building as we go through the study. Who is God? What's our picture of God? What do we learn about him in Genesis 1 through 11? Okay? Any questions? All right, business-wise, if we cancel because of weather, thank goodness whatever's coming is coming Wednesday, not Tuesday, I will email you, okay? So if you signed up online, I have your email. If you didn't sign up online, I might not have your email. So I think, Megan, I do have your email. But if you think I might not have your email, then write it down on a piece of paper and give it to me. Or you can text it to me, because while I have your information, you may not have my information. And that's why I put my information on that bag on your table, right? Not because I want you to fill it up with gifts for me, although if you would like to do that, I wouldn't be opposed. But on that bag, we're going to use that bag for something else, but also it has my contact information in case you need that for any reason. All right. We usually have a suggested donation that you do not have to make, but you can participate in. And it's only $5. Now, in our announcement, we said $10, but I'm changing it to $5 because we had to buy a book this time, and I just don't want it to be more expensive, okay? So $5 suggested donation. Plus, we do have a little bit of a surplus in our fund, so I don't want our fund to just be, money just sitting there doing nothing. So $5 will help cover childcare costs, any other costs, our name tags and other things that are associated. So just a $5 donation would be greatly appreciated. We start at 9:30, right? It's good to be here at 9:30. I myself have my grandson with me, so I'm going to be struggling time-wise as well, but 9:30 is when we start. Okay, any other questions about business? Any questions like that? All right. So let's get started with our getting to know you activity. Okay, so at your table, you have a bag, and this is what you're going to do. You're going to start with one person, right? You reach your hand in the bag, you pull out a question, you open it up, give your name if you think people don't know you. Hi, my name is Alana. Read your question, and then answer it. Okay, these are just getting to know you questions. It's just a variety of different things. Maybe you'll learn something new about somebody that you know very well, right? Maybe I don't know. Then fold it up, put it back in the bag, and the next person will pull it out, okay? Now, if by the third time you keep pulling out the same question, you can put it back and pull out something different. There's a variety of questions in there, okay? So I'm going to give you a bit of time to do that. And if you go through that and you still have more time, just start again, right? Pull out a different question and answer that question. All right? So have fun getting to know one another a little better at your table. Yeah. Okay, good. So those are kind of fun little, getting to know you questions. Actually, I do want to hear some of your answers to this question. What do you like to create? We don't want to hear everybody's answer on that, but so Denise said she likes to create bags of activities for the grandkids. What other kinds of things did people say? You can answer for yourself or for somebody else. Do you like to create? Kensley. She likes to crochet. Wonderful. What other kinds of things? You can answer for somebody else, yes. Oh, I said we didn't need to know every answer. Her mother is in the room. Okay. But honestly, that is a great answer. Especially, okay. Oh, what other things? Because I know we have a lot of creative people here in the room. So what kinds of things do you like to make or create? So like Teresa cooks, right? And she loves to make soups, all kinds of soups. Yep. Right? What else? Yes.
I'd like to create decor for rooms.
Yes.
I'm redoing one of our rooms right now. It's so fun.
Yeah.
I like to do it on a shoestring budget. So it's like can spray paint, Goodwill are my friends.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah. So to create and use what can I find to make a beautiful room, right? There's all kinds of things that we can create. We can cook, we can decorate, we can make gifts for other people, right? My daughter-in-law loves to create spreadsheets. She's all about the spreadsheet, and she has a spreadsheet for everything. So there's all kinds, and we have photographers in the room. We have all kinds we have musicians, like we just create things, right? I create lesson plans, right? So just, we create all kinds of things, right? There's just in us. Oh, Janet, yes. No. Janet, you like to create laughter.
Actually, God gives it to me, but then
Yeah, she likes to make people laugh, right? So there's all kinds of ways that we're creative. So these questions don't seem to have anything to do with one another, but actually they all come from the things we're going to study in Genesis 1 through 11, right? So we're going to talk about a boat. Now, not a kayak or a speedboat or anything like that, but we are going to talk about a boat, and we are going to talk about something that was built that was quite tall, right? So those are kind of directly taken. But our world is a beautiful place, right? Why is it so beautiful? Why do we have something in us that just wants to create? Right? All kinds of different things. Why is that? Nobody mentioned anything about remembering a grandparent. Did anybody get that question? What do you remember about a grandparent? Okay. Yeah. Now, some of us have good things that we want to remember about our families. Some of us have probably all of us have things we'd like to forget, right? About our families and our history and where did we come from. And people spend a lot of time studying these things, right? Well, we're going to see that in Genesis 1 through 11, the good and the bad of ancestry, right? People from different countries and different languages, and where did these all start and where do these all come from? These are all things, right, that we're going to talk about in Genesis 1 through 11. Yes, Alana.
When you talk about the history, as you all know, maybe some don't, but after 74 years, I found two sisters.
Yeah.
And I was able to hear about the grandparents.
Uh-huh.
Because they were able to experience the
Right.
grandparents.
Right.
And so I have their grave sites, so I can. So anyway, I've been trying.
And was that helpful for you or interesting to you? Yeah.
Because I never knew anything about them.
Yeah, there's something about us that really wants connection with our past, I think, right? And we feel at a loss if we don't have it. Or if it's all seems bad, we feel like we're missing out too, right? There's something about us that we want to know where we came from, right? Where did I come from? All right, yeah, and we're going to talk about all these things in Genesis 1 through 11. Now we're going to start our lesson, but before we start our lesson, Kayla, could I ask you to pray for us, just to open us up in prayer? Is that all right? Okay. Amen. Thank you. All right, let's open up our books to page 14. Week 1, right? Just 2 pages right there. Genesis introduction. Now, anytime that you read, now sometimes we just read large portions of Scripture just to read large portions of Scripture. That's a wonderful thing to do. Sometimes we dig in, right? I just want to read a book or study a book or a section of a book. And whenever you do that, it's really helpful if you can get some sort of introduction to that book. And so she asks us, who wrote it and what style was it written in and these kinds of things. Well, I don't know about you, but I just don't have that information off the top of my head for every book of the Bible, right? But thankfully, there's helps for that, okay? And this is just a good Bible study tip or a Bible study tool to think. Whenever we start a book, it's good to get some background information. Now, one of the things that I like about this study is that Jen Wilkin, the author, does a good job of taking us through chapters 1 through 11. She also does a good job of introducing us to Bible study tips, right? And these are things that we have used in previous Bible studies as we've gone through, but it's kind of nice to see that this isn't just something that Heather says, right? There's other people that say these are good ideas. And so I want us to keep track of these Bible study tools that we're going to learn as we go through. And I'm making a list on my back page, right? I wrote Bible study tools. And the first one that I wrote is read an intro to the book. Read an introduction to the book that we're going to read. So I would encourage you to do that. I would highly encourage you to keep a list of these as we go through them, and we'll talk about them as we go through them, because hopefully, Lord willing, on our wrap-up week, we're going to go over these again, okay, in some format. So you'll want to list. If you have a study Bible, in the beginning of every book, right, there should be an introduction to that book in your study Bible. Now, if you do not have a study Bible, that's okay. You're not a lesser Christian or anything like that. You just don't have, your Bible just doesn't have those notes. But there are free online resources, right, to do this as well. Now, the internet is a blessing and a curse, right? There's all kinds of good stuff out there. There's all kinds of wonky stuff out there. So this is why you have this piece of paper, and just in case you're interested, right? I gave everybody this piece of paper, resources for an overview of each book. So let's say this summer you're reading through, I don't know, James. And I kind of want to know a little bit about James. But I don't have a study Bible, or my study Bible is just so boring and dry, and maybe there's another thing that I could. So these are good places, resources. These are not the only good resources out there, but you can't give a really long list or it's overwhelming, right? So the first one is insight.org, which is from Chuck Swindoll, so it's a little bit older, right? Now, some of you know, I obviously know how to get around a website, Heather, but some of us need a little more direction. So I tried to give some directions on how to get to where this is, right? But on that insight.org, you can get to different books of the Bible, and he has a good summary of each book of the Bible. It's not as in-depth as what you're going to find in your study Bible, but it's easy to understand, it's clear, it's helpful. He also gives charts. I'm a chart person, and I like his charts. So I think those are helpful. The next one is thebibleproject.com, and a lot of you may be familiar with this, but these are a lot of videos. And they have specific videos on each book of the Bible, and it gives you kind of an outline, but with pictures and drawings. It's animated, an outline of that book. And those are very helpful, I think. Now, one other one is, if you want to write it down, which is also very good, is called Overview Bible. One word, overviewbible.com. Also very helpful, very easy to navigate. Good information. Now, whenever you give a website, right, that doesn't mean that I'm going to 100% wholeheartedly agree with every little thing that you're going to find on these websites, right? Just like when you listen to a teacher. You always have to evaluate what you're hearing, right? But these are going to put you in a good direction in case you didn't have a study Bible, or you don't really like the notes in your study Bible, or you just want some extra information. Those are good places to go to. All right. Now, if you do have a study Bible, I would like you to open your Bible up to the introduction to Genesis. If you don't have a study Bible, there is a piece of paper on your table underneath that bag, right? That is a printout from insight.org, right, with Chuck Swindoll's information. And then if you want to see what his charts look like, there's a chart there too, okay? So you can use that. We can share Bibles around the table if we need to share Bibles around the table, okay? We're just going to look at the introduction. All right. And again, I feel like, yes, we know these things. I'm really not trying to insult anybody's intelligence, but we're just going to go through this just a little bit, okay? Different study Bibles organize their introductory material in different ways. Or they have different titles, or, it's okay, it's all right. There should be something in there that talks about the author, who wrote the book. Something in there about the date, when was it written. Something in there about background information, maybe some helpful cultural notes or things like that. There might be themes. What are some themes that you're going to find as you read through this book? And some other information. My favorite, but probably nobody else is there. What are the literary features of this book? How is this book organized? Okay, so helpful information. Now, it is a little dry. Not going to lie, right? It's kind of textbooky. And sometimes you might read through that and be like, oh my gosh, I don't even feel like I understand what they're saying. Not because we're not intelligent, we're just saying things that ways we don't usually talk, okay? So it is a little bit dry, but it is really good to read through it. My suggestion from time to time is read through it, and then as you're reading through a book, maybe you get halfway through the book, go back and read the introduction again, because it'll make a little bit more sense once you've got into the book itself, okay? So it's a tool. So we are just going to go through this a little bit. Okay, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to assign each table one of these questions to answer, okay? And then I want you to look through your own study Bible and talk with the people at your table. Maybe they have something to add to what's in your study Bible. Okay, these aren't huge questions, right? But we can do it. So we're just going to start here. Why don't you guys go with who? Sometimes you'll have a variety of opinions, right? So we're going to go with who. Then you guys go with when was it written. This table here, Kayla's table, we're going to skip the next question. We're going to go with what style was it written? What style? Or sometimes your study Bible might say, what genre was this written in? Or if you speak French, what genre? I don't speak French. Okay. And this table what is the central theme? Or you can say doesn't have to be the central theme, but what are themes in Genesis, okay? I'm going to give you a few minutes to read in your own study Bible, see if everybody agrees or anybody adds to it. Okay, and then we're going to take a break. Okay, so I'll give you about 5 minutes. If you finish with yours, you guys can go on and answer another question. Okay? I'm going to turn to Exodus 33. You can if you want to. Oh, should have had it marked. Exodus 33. All right. So this is the end of Exodus. We're going to read a little bit about how that camp was built. And Moses used to take a tent and pitch it outside of the camp. So there's a camp, right, with a tabernacle in the middle. Okay, and outside of the camp, Moses would pitch a tent, and he called it the tent of meeting. Anyone inquiring of the Lord, if you had a question, anyone inquiring of the Lord would go to the tent of meeting outside the camp. But whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise and stand at the entrance of their tents and watch Moses as he entered the tent. Moses would into the tent, and the pillar of cloud would come down and stay at the entrance. Now remember, that pillar of cloud is the presence of God, would come and stay at that entrance. And the Lord would speak with Moses. Whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance to the tent, they all stood and worshiped, each at the entrance of his tent. And the Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as in one man speaks to another. Moses had a lot of face-to-face. Well, it's called face-to-face. God doesn't have a face, okay? But had a lot of face-to-face time with the Lord in that tent. And we don't know if in that tent is where he was actually writing, okay? But it's not a stretch, right, for us to think that even though Moses wasn't there in the beginning, in the days of Noah, in the days of Babel, while Abraham lived, God was inspiring him and working through him to write down that history. Okay, so our author is human author, Moses, divine author, the Lord himself, working together, writing it. Okay, any questions on that or anything else you found? Okay, sometimes you'll read that like a couple 100 years ago, there was this idea that there were 4 different authors to the book of Genesis, and they call it like the JEDP, like J stands for somebody, E stands for somebody, and that they wrote later, and that all of these versions were just smushed together, and that's where Genesis came from. That's really, even the people that kind of came up with that idea aren't really following that idea anymore, but you might read that in your study Bible, because a good study Bible will actually give you a variety of thought, right? And one of the reasons that idea, besides the fact, well, of what we talked about, right? The Pentateuch was all one author. It all holds together. But Genesis has a very specific structure that we're going to talk about in a little bit. And if you follow that JEDP method, it totally breaks up that internal structure of Genesis. It just, you can't break Genesis up in the way that they say. So don't worry about that. But Moses is the author, the human author. Okay. When? What did you guys find out? Did you find anything particular about when the book was written?
1446 to 1406 BC.
Okay, and that it's BC. So in those 1400 years, I don't know if that's the early 1400s or the late 1400s because it goes backwards. That was the date. Okay, great. Did you have any other dates in your? Okay, real close to that. Okay, during the 40-year wandering in the desert, and they place it in that mid-1400s. Okay, yes, I completely would agree with that. Now, sometimes you're going to find maybe around in the 1200s, they think that it was written. Okay, so why do we sometimes have 2 different dates for the book of Genesis? What everybody agrees on is what Donna said. It was written during those last 40 years of Moses' life. After they crossed the Red Sea and before Moses died, okay, sometime in there is when Moses wrote Genesis and the rest of the Pentateuch. Now, people disagree on when the Exodus took place, so that's why sometimes you'll find 2 different dates. But what everybody agrees on is that he wrote it during that, while they're in the wilderness, right, making their way to the promised land. That's when it was written. Now, these stories and histories and records of these events have been around for a long, thousands of years, right? But at this point in time, God is inspiring Moses to write down the authoritative, Spirit-inspired record, okay, as they're going through the wilderness on their way home. Questions? Okay, so let's go to the next question. To whom was it written? Okay, I didn't have anybody look this up because we know when it was written during those 40 years in the wilderness, so we know to whom it was written, right? So someone, who was it written to originally? Pardon? The Israelites, yeah. That was the original audience, are those Israelites in the desert, right? Forming a new nation, on their way, right? That is the original audience. Now, why do we care about who was the original audience? Right? It's important. Because before we think, well, what does this mean to me? We need to think, well, what did it mean to them? When they first heard it, what would it have meant to them? And we cannot change the meaning, what it means to us, and make it drastically different. Okay? We understand, so I'm just going to give you a pretend story. This totally could have happened, but didn't actually happen. But let's say back in ancient days, when I was in elementary school, I wrote a note to my best friend whose name was Judy, very good name. And it wasn't that Judy, but a different Judy. And I said, Judy, can you believe Ben ate a worm on the playground? That's so sick! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. Your best friend forever, Heather, heart, 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 right? Because that's how we did things, okay? And I would pass it to her. And then she would write back, so sick, And then, best friends, love you, Heather, Judy. Heart, 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 heart. Okay. So, and for some reason, that little piece of paper got saved in all of my, mementos from elementary school. Now, I have some nieces that are quite a bit younger than my own children, and then, so let's say my niece, and they truly do love to look through all that old stuff and laugh at our pictures and, what our glasses looked like and all that. And so let's say they're going through this stuff, and they're laughing, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, gross, oh, Aunt Heather, you like to eat worms? I'd be like, no, what are you talking about? And they're like, well, you have a note here, and it's in your handwriting, and you said, that's so sick, right? Because when they say that's sick, they mean, that's awesome, right? And I'd be like, you can't take your modern culture and language and impose it on my ancient language and culture and make it mean something completely different. What I meant was it was gross, what it was received as, what the original audience said, that's gross, and you can't change it to mean that's good, right? It has to mean what it meant to the original audience, right? So that's why we're going to think a little bit about these guys as we go through Genesis 1 through 11. What would this have meant to them, right? And then what does it mean to us? Now, these are God's saved from Egypt people, right? These people have either they themselves or they saw their parents put the blood over their door. These people went through the Red Sea. They have been saved from Egypt. They're not yet home, but they're God's saved people, right? And as they're going home, they're going to become a nation for the first time, right? A nation, these people of God. And they're going to be a light to they're supposed to be a light to the rest of the world around them. And so if they're going to do that, there's some things that they need to know. Who is this God who saved you? What more can you know about him? Right? And so that's one of these questions that Genesis is seeking to answer. Who is this God that saved you? How is he different from the gods of Egypt? How is he different from the gods of the Canaanites where you're going? God wants these people to know who he is. He wants these people to know, in light of who God is, what is he doing in the world? And what is their part in it? How are they supposed to live and be and behave in light of their part in who this God is and what he's doing in the world? Okay, these are the questions that Genesis is answering for these people. All right, now we are not these people, but we are not unlike these people. Right? We've been saved from something far greater than Egypt. Right? We've been saved from our sin. If you're a Christian and have put your faith and trust that Christ died on the cross to pay the payment that you owe to the Lord because of your sin, right, you're saved. And totally lost my track of thought there. Guys, I'm so excited about being saved. Okay, you're saved, but you're not yet home, right? You're walking through your life to get home. As a saved person, you are to be a light to the people around you, and we need those same questions answered. Who is this God who saved me? I want to know him better. How can I reflect him if I don't know him? And why am I supposed to reflect him in the first place? And what is he doing in this world, and what is my part in it? We have the same questions that they had. So whatever it meant to them in answering those questions is what it means to us in answering those questions as well. The original audience. Who was it written to? Because they are the original audience, but we are also the audience. Okay? Any questions on who? Yes.
He chose us. We are his children.
Yes, yes. We are his people. Exactly. Thank you. Yes. As they were that Old Testament Israelite nation, right, we are called, as believers, a holy nation, his people, right? And so how do we fulfill what they were supposed to represent. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Cheryl. All right, so we have God speaking through Moses to this first generation out of Egypt people, really to all people that belong to the people of God, right? Who is he? What is his plan, his purpose, his promise, and how do we live in light of that? And that is why that wrap-up part of your study is so important. Who is God, and how do we live in light of that? That's the questions that he's looking to answer in Genesis. All right. This table we had, what style is Genesis written in? What kinds of things did you find out? Oh, okay. Okay. You called it a historical narrative just because you pulled those words out of your hat? I love it. Yes. Okay. So maybe if you read in there, they say things like, oh, there's poetry in Genesis, which there's poetry. There's genealogy, which is it's an actual form of how you write things out, and that is. But most of Genesis is historical narrative. Narrative. Actually, 40% of the Bible is narrative. So good job, guys. You have a wonderful hat to pull things out of. Narrative. Yeah, 40% of the Bible is narrative. Genesis. The books of history, like, 1st and 2nd Kings and 1st and 2nd Samuel and Ezra, those are narrative. The Gospels are narrative. Acts are mostly narrative. Acts is narrative. Okay, so if 40% of the Bible is narrative, we need to understand a few things about narrative. Because when we say the Bible is narrative, sometimes it makes my heart just pitter-patter a little bit because people think narrative means fiction, right? Narrative is story, and story is fiction. But that is not what narrative means, okay? Narrative means facts. It can be fiction, okay? Fiction, a story can be totally made up, but narrative can also be facts told in story format. Okay, truth told in story format. So, if we think of biblical narrative, we're going to give you a couple things. Biblical narrative is not fiction, but it is true events told in story format. Now, the Bible could have I guess it could have been just a bunch of bullet points, right? Yeah, and who would read that? Well, Janelle likes bullet points, right? A bunch of bullet points. Or it could have been like the introduction, just fact, 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 like a textbook. Right? But he's telling us these truths, real people, real events that really happened, and there's a story to it, and it grabs our attention, and we remember it, and we relate to the people, right? So it's truth in a story format with characters and conflict and resolution. Okay, another thing about biblical narrative is it is usually not prescriptive, it is usually descriptive. Oh, what kind of sentence is that? Okay, it is usually not prescriptive, it is usually descriptive. Now, prescriptive means you're prescribing something or commanding something, right? So when we think of like the letters in the New Testament, right, they say, love your neighbor, prescriptive, telling you what to do. Preach the gospel. Practice hospitality, right? Those are commands. That's telling us exactly what to do. Now, we do have these in the Old Testament, right? Got the 10 Commandments, right? And other things that are prescriptive. Narrative can be that way, but oftentimes it's describing something, right? It's describing who is God, who are the people that lived at this time, what did it mean for them to express and live their faith. And then from that, we can take, okay, what does it mean for me to live and express my faith? Okay, the obvious example is Noah built an ark. So I got to go build an ark. No, that's taking it prescriptively, telling me, commanding me what to do. Okay, we see that clearly in Noah's ark, but we don't see that so clearly in other things. But it's telling us, well, Noah was faithful to the Lord, even though people were against him. Okay, now that in my life does not look like building a boat, but what in my life does look like being faithful to the Lord, right? In spite of opposition, right? That's the difference, okay? So biblical narrative is not fiction. It's true events in story format. It's not usually prescriptive. It's usually just descriptive. And it is not man-centered. We're going to meet a lot of people. There's a lot of characters. Stories have characters. We're going to meet Adam. We're going to meet Eve, right? We're going to meet Seth. We're going to meet a guy named Lamech, or however you pronounce his name, right? We're going to meet all of these people. But they're not the center of the story, right? We want to learn from them, but they're not the center. I said a lot. They're not the center. They're not the center of the story, right? God is the center of the story. He is the main character. If this is true events that happen to real people in story format, we cannot forget that God is the main character. Okay? So that's why we're saying, who is God? And then who is man? And who am I? And how do I respond to him? All right? Narrative. Thoughts or questions on narrative? Okay. Then our last one was you guys, and a theme of the book, a central theme of the book, or one theme of the book, because there's a lot. What did you guys come up with? Okay, creation is definitely a theme. Redemption, definitely a theme. Okay, beginning of a chosen race. Yeah, let's just stop at that word beginning for a minute. Beginnings. Those are creation, redemption, and beginnings. We're going to talk about them all, okay? So beginnings, right? It comes right from the title. Genesis kind of means like the Genesis, the start, the beginning, okay? What kind of things began in Genesis? Just shout out some things. The world, matter, right? Right. What else? Yep, humanity, animals, all of that. Pardon? Sin. We have the beginnings of sin. Family. We have the beginning of family. We have the beginning of everything, right? Our world, we have the beginning of time. Time itself and how time is measured. Our natural world, the world that we can't see, right, has a beginning. Sin, hate, jealousy, murder, all begin in Genesis 1 through 11. We have nations and languages. We have the beginnings of God's promise. Right? We have the beginnings of God's promise. We have the beginning of everything in Genesis 1 through 11. What is one thing that doesn't begin in Genesis 1 through 11? God. Okay, yeah. God does not have a beginning or an end. He's the one thing that doesn't begin in Genesis 1 through 11. Okay, so one of the themes is beginnings, and beginnings of that particular nation, the Hebrew people. Okay, they mentioned creation and redemption. There's the theme of creation, sin, and redemption. And it repeats itself several times throughout Genesis 1 through 11. Okay? So there's a repeated pattern of creation, sin, and redemption that we're going to see as we read through it. So one theme is beginning, one theme is the pattern, and another theme we get, because, I like structure, okay? So we get from reading the structure of the book. It is highly structured. We're going to just point out a few things for a particular reason. It has the story of creation. That's the introduction. Then there's 10 sections to Genesis following that. 10 sections. And they're marked out by the saying, these are the generations of, and then fills in the blank. Or your version might say, these are the descendants of, and then fills in the blank. That's 10 times in Genesis, breaking it up into 10 different sections. Like if you're reading a book and you read chapter 2 and you turn the page and there's a 3 at the top, I'm in a new chapter, right? There's a break in thought. Maybe we're changing the setting. right? So when you're reading through Genesis and you say, these are the generations of, you think, oh, something new is happening here. There's a break in thought. Where is my focus to be now? Okay? These markers. There's 5 of them are from Genesis up to Abraham. And then 5 of them are from Abraham to the end. Okay? So we have 5 in chapters 1 through 11, and then 5 in like the middle of 11 through 50. Okay, some of them are short narratives, some of them are long narratives, some of them are genealogies, and there's a very specific pattern to how you go through all of that, okay? But we have this pattern. And what it's showing you as you read, especially in Genesis 1 through 11, as the world increases in population, so does chaos and sin and control. It just seems like everything's out of control, right? And then he says, and these are the descendants of, but these are the descendants of, but these are the descendants of. And God is saying, as you see how terrible and out of control the world is getting, also don't forget to look. Look a little narrower. Look a little narrower. Look, I'm working. I'm working. Okay, so we have this theme of God is in control and keeping his promise. And those 10 sections focus our attention in on how is God in control and how is he keeping his promise. Okay, that's the theme. There's many themes in Genesis 1 through 11. Actually, any theme in the Bible actually has its start in Genesis 1 through 11. Right? We have this overarching Bible, right, from creation to death to new creation, right, and eternity. Right? And in the whole Bible, that first 5 books of the Bible is the introduction, basically. Sets the stage for all that is to come. And in the Pentateuch, or those first 5 books, Genesis is the introduction to the rest of the law, right? It sets the stage. And in Genesis 1 through 11 is the introduction to all of Genesis. So Genesis 1 through 11 is the introduction to all of the Bible. Everything you're going to see in the Bible gets its start in 1 through 11. It just unfolds more clearly, it develops more fully until we get to Christ and his resurrection and his ascension. Okay, but it all starts Genesis 1 through 11. So we're going to get it right in Genesis 1 through 11, and we'll get the whole rest of the Bible right. Okay? Themes. So that's it. That's the introduction, right? God writing through Moses to his pilgrim people, the Israelites in the wilderness, and us, his pilgrim people, making our way home, needing to be encouraged by knowing who is he? How great is he? What are the things he has done? What is his plan? Where are you in that plan as you make your way home, right? To know him better. He's going to tell it through a lot of different characters, through stories, but the main character is going to be God, making his promises and keeping his promises. Genesis 1 through 11. Okay? So when you go home, we'll start the exciting work of actually getting into Genesis. Yeah? Yeah. All right. Any questions or thoughts so far? Okay, great. So we have lots of time now to pray at your tables if you want to share anything that you want to share or pray as you want to pray, right? You can pray at your tables and then just be dismissed.